Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Grace Kelly was considered a movie star even though she only appeared in 11 feature films, all in the early 1950s. However, her legacy is one of the most beautiful and enduring Hollywood legends of all time. Her name evokes a time of glamour, elegance and timelessness. The fact that she married a prince and became actual royalty as well as being Hollywood royalty is just icing on her already perfect cake. Why was Grace Kelly branded a loose home wrecker? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Grace was ambitious, opportunistic and a romantic at heart, who starred alongside famous leading men like Cary Grant, Clark Gable, Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra, which led to speculation that didn't go well with the image that she was cultivating. The press described her as an ice queen, but her fellow actors and directors adored her. Grace's life was just like a movie script, including the marriage to a prince and 3 beautiful children. But what was Grace Kelly's life really like? Grace Patricia Kelly was born into an affluent and influential family on November 12, 1929, at the Hahnemann University Hospital in Philadelphia. Her mother, Margaret Mayer, was of German descent and was first a model and then taught at the University of Pennsylvania, and was the first female athletics coach they ever had. Her father, John B. Kelly Sr., was an Irish immigrant who went on to win 3 gold medals for the USA in sculling, as well as owning a prominent brickwork contracting company. He also ran for mayor in 1935, losing by the slimmest margin in the city's electoral history. Not only did her father work on the Fairmont Park Commission, but during World War II he was appointed to the position of National Director of Physical Fitness by none other than President Roosevelt himself. While Grace's father had a lot of connections, one of her uncles, Walter, was a vaudeville star who made films for MGM and Paramount Pictures. And her other uncle, George, was a Pulitzer Prize-winning director, dramatist and screenwriter. Even before Grace was born, her family had all the connections for her to become a star in so many areas. Grace was one of 4 Kelly kids. Margaret and John Jr. were older, and Elizabeth was baby after Grace. They were raised as good Irish Catholics in a tight-knit community. Grace was baptized and educated at St. Bridget's in East Falls. Her high school years were at Ravenhill Academy. She modelled at charity fashion events along with her mother and sisters, where she gained experience on the stage. This led to an interest in acting, and in 1942, at the age of 12, she played the lead in Don't Feed the Animals, a play put on by the old Academy players in East Falls. While studying at Stevens School in her senior years, she participated in drama and dance classes. Her yearbook listed her favourite actress as Ingrid Bergman, and her Stevens prophecy was listed as a famous star of the stage and screen. She applied to Bennington College after graduation, but her low mathematics scores had her application rejected. Grace announced that she wanted to become an actress, which her father disapproved of and felt was a cut above streetwalker at the time. She then applied to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York by acting out a scene from her Uncle George's play, The Torchbearers, and even though they had met their admissions quota for the year, they interviewed her, and with George's influence on her side, they made an exception and welcomed her into the school. To give credit where it's due, Grace was diligent in her studies and practiced her speaking parts using a tape recorder. She got her first break on the stage and made her Broadway debut in The Father, a play by Strindberg, and starred alongside Raymond Massey. When she graduated from the Academy, she played the part of Tracy Lord in The Philadelphia Story. Her uncle was heavily involved and acted as a mentor to her throughout her acting career. Acting careers were hard to break into in 1948, and when you were only 19 it's even harder. So when she was hired by John Roberts Powers Agency as a model for cigarettes and bug spray advertisements, she jumped at the chance, even though her father insisted that she live in the Barbizon Hotel for Women. Grace had a wonderful time in the 3 years that she lived at the hotel, and was often found dancing down the corridors to Hawaiian music, and on one occasion shocking her fellow residents by being topless when she did. A television producer saw her and decided to cast her as the lead role in Bethel Merriday, and this became the first of 60 live television programs that she did for them. She impressed director Henry Hathaway enough for him to cast her in a minor role in her first film, 14 Hours, in 1951, as a young woman thinking about a divorce. It turned out that the cameras loved Grace, and not only did she look amazing on the screen, but she was also cooperative and always able to take direction happily and easily. Even though the fans took to the brand new actress and the Grace Kelly fan club was born, critics largely ignored her and her film career stalled a little. She still had plenty of television and theatre work to keep her occupied, but her voice wasn't as good for the stage as it was for film. So, when in 1952 Grace was offered a part in the movie High Noon, starring opposite Gary Cooper, she was thrilled. It was a western to be shot in California over a 28-day period in late summer. Whilst the character of a young, quiet Quaker bride was never going to be a highly dramatic or challenging role for her, Grace was disappointed by the results. Hitchcock described her performance as mousy, and critics argued over the chances of the character saving the day the way hers did in the story. The movie picked up 4 Academy Awards, but afterward Grace returned to New York and took up acting lessons. She was now determined to be taken seriously as an actor and performed in mainly theatre dramas to help achieve her goal. She continued with her television and theatre plays, but she also continued to screen test for movies as the opportunities arose. In September 1952, she screen tested for the film Taxi and was noticed by director John Ford. He had flown her out to Los Angeles, where she was signed to a 7-year contract with MGM. She was happy to sign up with the studio on 2 conditions: one, that she stayed in her Manhattan home, and 2, that she could take time off every 2 years to pursue theatre plays. They agreed, and she signed on with a $750 a week salary. Her next film was Mogambo, where she played the wife of a man who is on safari in Africa, and they get involved in a complicated love triangle with a game hunter played by Clark Gable. Grace famously said she had 3 great reasons to do Mogambo: John Ford, Clark Gable, and a free trip to Africa. If it had been shot in Arizona, Grace said she would never have taken the part. It's widely assumed that Grace had an affair with Clark Gable during the filming of Mogambo. Her mother certainly thought so and flew out to Africa to chaperone her daughter. It seems that she may have been too late, as Clark grew tired of her when she got too clingy. When asked about the affair later in life, Grace is famously quoted as saying, "What else is there to do if you are alone in a tent in Africa with Clark Gable?" Mogambo was released in 1953, and Grace won her first Golden Globe Award and her first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress for the role. The success of this movie brought her a starring role in The Way of the Eagle, a television play, and then the movie Dial M for Murder, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. While filming M for Murder, Grace had an affair with co-star Ray Milland, who had been married for over 20 years. When his wife found out, she threw Milland out of the house. Milland thought about leaving his wife for Grace until he realized how much that was going to cost him. The affair should have cost Grace her career. Hedda Hopper was a gossip columnist in Hollywood who was out to destroy anyone who had a moral code that she didn't agree with. In her column, she branded Grace a nymphomaniac and a homewrecker after the illicit affair. This was a time when women were expected to be prim and proper, and Hedda Hopper was the type of columnist to call out any star that wasn't acting in a pure and demure way. Ingrid Bergman had been shunned by Hollywood when she left her husband for director Roberto Rossellini, and Ed Sullivan blacklisted her from his show. Somehow Grace avoided all this, as she looked so decorous with her angel face and golden locks. The public saw Grace as wholesome, despite her very busy private life. Zsa Zsa Gabor, who had 9 husbands, once said that Grace had more boyfriends in a month than I had in a lifetime. Clara Bow, another actress of the time, commented that Grace Kelly will get away with it. Want to know why? The damned public would never believe it, when referring to Grace's personal life. Although signed on to MGM, Paramount was keen to have her, and she was loaned to them for 2 more Hitchcock films, which became her most critically acclaimed roles. Alfred Hitchcock became a mentor to Grace during these films, and he remained a close friend and support for the rest of her life. After the Hitchcock films, Grace then starred as the wife of a fighter pilot in the movie The Bridges of Toko-Ri. Grace was starting to make a name for herself, and not long after this she snagged her first major film role as the wife of a marshal in the 1952 movie High Noon. It was during this movie that Grace's habit of having affairs with her leading men developed. Grace's affair with Gary Cooper. It was her first major affair, and the fact that he was 28 years older than her became the theme of her affairs that followed. In 1954, Grace starred in The Country Girl, where she was rumoured to have had an affair with Bing Crosby. Her performance as the wife of a has-been singer given a second chance in a musical got her an Oscar. It's rumoured that Bing came to her hotel room afterward expecting to spend the night with her, but found Marlon Brando in her room already. Grace was young and so taken advantage of by the studios, especially when it came to payment. For the movie To Catch a Thief, she was paid $5,000, but Cary Grant received $18,500. It was the same with Mogambo. Gable got $500 a week, and Grace only received her $750 salary that was originally agreed upon her contract. Oleg Cassini was a fashion designer that Grace fell in love with as her star was rising. Her parents disapproved of him due to his Russian background, and so when she told them that she was getting engaged to him, they told her an emphatic no. Cassini's previous divorces also met with their objection, and so in the end the engagement was called off. It's rumoured that the couple had conceived a child, but it was terminated so that Grace could keep her parents' approval. After back-to-back filming of Rear Window, Toko-Ri, Country Girl and Green Fire, Grace went to France to start filming her third Hitchcock film, To Catch a Thief. She and her co-star Cary Grant developed a friendship based on mutual admiration, and the two enjoyed spending time together on set and as close friends. Many years later, Grant was asked to name his all-time favourite actress, and he replied without hesitation, "Well, with all due respect to dear Ingrid Bergman, I much preferred Grace. She had serenity." In April 1955, Grace headed the delegation to the Cannes Film Festival, and she was invited to have her photo taken at the Palace of Monaco with Prince Rainier III. There was a series of delays and complications, but finally Grace met the Prince and the photos were taken. It was the first time she had met Prince Rainier. After the Cannes Film Festival, Grace returned to America and began working on The Swan, where she just happened to be playing the part of a princess. At the time, Grace was romantically involved with a French actor called Jean-Pierre Aumont, but had started to write regular letters to the Prince. In December later the same year, Prince Rainier came on an official tour to the United States, although many speculated that he was looking for an American wife to help save his principality. He needed to produce an heir, or the small state would revert back to France via a 1918 treaty. At a press conference during his tour of America, Prince Rainier was asked if he was looking for a wife, and if so, what kind. He responded with, "I don't know, the best." Grace managed to meet up with Prince Rainier and invited him to meet her family. 3 days later, the prince proposed and Grace accepted. She was going to be a princess. She was shooting the film High Society with Bing Crosby at the time of her engagement. It's very unlikely that they hooked up again due to Grace's engagement, but they were always close. The character that Grace was playing was also engaged, and you can see the 10.47 carat ring that Prince Rainier gave her being worn in that movie. The wedding news was greeted with sensation by both the Americans and the Monegasques. America already saw Grace as Hollywood royalty, and the marriage was soon dubbed the Wedding of the Century. The preparations were elaborate, with a religious wedding date set for April 19, 1956. The Palace of Monaco was redecorated inside and out, and a rumoured $2 million was provided by Grace's family as a dowry. However, Prince Rainier wasn't the only royalty that Grace had dated. She was briefly involved with Playboy millionaire Prince Ali Khan, who married Rita Hayworth, as well as having a dalliance with the Shah of Iran, who showered Grace with jewellery and gold. The marriage sadly was seen as the end of Grace's acting career, one that had just gotten started and still had a long way to go. Alfred Hitchcock quipped around this time that he was happy that Grace had found herself such a good part to play. America was in love with the romance of the marriage that one of their own was to become a real-life princess. When Grace left America by ship on April 4th, thousands of fans gathered at Pier 84 in New York Harbour to party and farewell her, and when she arrived 8 days later in Monaco on the SS Constitution, 20,000 people lined the streets to welcome their new princess-to-be. The laws of Monaco required a civil and a religious wedding for the couple to become husband and wife, and on April 18th the 40-minute civil ceremony was broadcast to the world. All 142 titles that Grace inherited with her marriage were also recited. The day after the civil ceremony was conducted, the religious one was held in St. Nicholas Cathedral. Grace wore her wedding dress that had taken 36 dressmakers over 6 weeks to make. It was designed by Academy Award-winning costume designer Helen Rose, and was seen by an estimated 30 million people on television. The wedding festivities went on for days, and the couple started their married life by leaving for their honeymoon on the prince's yacht, Deo Juvanti II, the day after the second ceremony. Life as a princess was not quite what Grace was expecting. She soon became a mother with the birth of her first child, Princess Caroline, almost a year after the wedding, and then produced the heir to the throne in 1958, Prince Rainier III. Her new husband banned all showings of her films in Monaco, and when Hitchcock offered her a lead role as a kleptomaniac in his next movie Marnie, she was keen, but the public was outraged. She was forced to reconsider and then reject the project. Another attempt to lure the princess back into the movie-making industry was made by director Herbert Ross, but the offer was firmly squashed, this time by Prince Rainier himself. Grace's third child, Princess Stephanie, was born in 1965, and Grace started to appear on stage doing a series of poetry readings. She also narrated a documentary, The Children of Theatre Street, and an ABC television film called A Poppy is Also a Flower. She used her position as a princess to improve the arts institutions of Monaco, and then created the Princess Grace Foundation to support local artists. She planned Christmas parties for local orphans, and dedicated a garden club because of her love of flowers. She also spoke on behalf of the breastfeeding group La Lèche League as a celebrity. And of course Grace has been on best dressed lists across the globe since 1960. For 26 years, Grace was the Princess of Monaco. She supported charities, developed arts programs, helped the poor and needy, and did it all so glamorously and so elegantly. Grace loved the people of Monaco, and the people of Monaco adored Grace. In September 1982, when Grace was driving along the windy coastline of France on her way back to Monaco, she had a stroke that caused her to drive her Rover off the road and down a cliff. She had her youngest daughter, Princess Stephanie, in the car with her, who tried to control the car but was unable to stop it from hurtling down the steep embankment. She was pulled from the car alive but unconscious and severely injured. Stephanie was reportedly unhurt, but was later found to have suffered a concussion and a cervical fracture. She never regained consciousness and died the next day in the Monaco hospital, leaving behind a grieving husband, 3 children, and 2 nations to mourn her. She was only 52. Her funeral and requiem mass was held in the same cathedral that she was married in over a quarter of a century before. Princess Stephanie was unable to attend due to her injuries, but over 400 other guests from all over the world attended. She was then buried in the Grimaldi family vault on September 18th, and in 2005 her husband, having never remarried, joined her after his own death. With such a warm and generous spirit, it seems strange that Grace Kelly was called an ice queen by the American press. Grace was reluctant to give interviews and managed to keep her private life private enough that the press often published rumours and innuendo in order to have a story to print. They called her the Ice Queen, and with her ice blonde looks, regal air and aloofness, it was easy to see how the label stuck. Grace often said she was paid as an actress, not as a personality for the press to print stories about, and continued to decline interviews and remained cool and reserved in public. She may have been portrayed as an ice queen in the press, but the Grace Kelly that we all remember was a hard-working, beautiful princess with a generous and a warm heart. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. The thing that the public has a false image of Hollywood stars is not an uncommon case. How Katharine Hepburn jumped from man to get fame. Watch this video and find out.